Hi, I'm John G. Smith. I'm the editor of Today's Trucking, and I'm here with Samantha Saracen of the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. In this video series, we're going to be exploring something that affects truckers across this country. Specifically, what happens during a roadside inspection, and how do you earn one of these, a Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance decal. Samantha, what does it mean when you see one of these on a truck?
When we spot one of these on the truck or trailer coming through the scale, what it means to us is that the vehicle has recently passed a level 1 inspection and complies with all the components of the legislation.
So that's the goal we're shooting for. Let's see how we make it happen. So one of the first things that we're looking at, Samantha, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance sets the standards for the inspections themselves, but anyone who's rolled through a scale at one time or another knows that not all inspections are created equal. Some they're rolling right through, it's nice and quick. Some points they find you crawling over every inch of the truck. What are the different types of inspections you can run into?
You can run into generally 5 different types of inspections. Level 1 is the number 1 inspection that we do, which involves vehicle and driver. So we look at the driver's credentials as well as all of the mechanical components on the vehicle itself. So that is the number 1 inspection, and that's where you're going to earn that CVSA decal that we spoke about. The level 2 inspection is basically a circle check. So we look at all of the vehicle components from the outside as well as determine the driver's qualifications to drive. Level 3 is basically just a documentation and driver inspection. So we don't look at any of the vehicle mechanics, we're only looking at driver and driver's paperwork. Those are the typical inspections you'll see at a scale. There's also a level 4, which is a special inspection, which is created to either refute or support a trend.
So when you have a blitz on a specific component, that's when that one could go.
That's right.
Through.
So
okay.
level 4s, we're only targeting certain vehicle components. So we won't look at drivers' qualifications during those special initiatives. And then the level 5 is a driverless inspection. So at a terminal or at a collision without a driver.
Clearly, one of the most important documents when we come into a circle check for any driver these days is the Schedule 1. And that's what's really dividing up all the individual components that we have to check on the vehicle, as well as the difference between major and minor defects in each case. Now, we're going to be looking at this in the various components and segments of this video series. But Samantha, what is really the difference between the minor and major defects? How do those have to be treated differently?
Minor defects, if you discover one of those, so whether it's during your initial pre-trip inspection or when you stop for coffee or lunch, you can continue driving with minor defects. As long as you're recording them in your inspection report and reporting them to the operator. When you discover a major defect, these defects are considered imminent road hazards. So they're imminent to the safe operation and handling and maneuverability of your commercial vehicle and would therefore have a greater impact should one of them fail. So major defects, you need to stop immediately until the defect no longer exists.
So if you find a major defect on a vehicle, that vehicle is going to be placed out of service during the inspection, correct?
In most cases, yes.
Okay. Now, in the case of the minor ones, how long do they have to actually do the repair? So they've recorded it, they notice that a particular issue exists, but again, how long do they have to actually have that item repaired?
They can finish their current trip, and then before the vehicle's dispatched again, they must be repaired.
So it's not 24 hours, it's during that trip?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, let's go find out what those defects might look like. Now, the one type of inspection most guys are going to be familiar with is the level 3, where you're really climbing through all of the different paperwork that's in there. What are you looking for in the way of paperwork from a vehicle when it pulls in?
We're looking for a number of things. Number 1, obviously driver credentials. So whether that be their driver's license from Ontario, from another jurisdiction, training certificates if they're carrying a certain commodity like dangerous goods, they're required to have training. We're also looking at registration, so permits for truck, trailer, insurance certificates, CVOR or NSC numbers, and also their pre-trip inspection report and hours of service logs if required.
So for those people from other jurisdictions, CVOR is the Commercial Vehicle Operator Record, and that's really taking a look at their safety record from that jurisdiction and how they're working there.
That's right.
Okay. And what is the most common issue that you tend to run into with the paperwork? Where do drivers tend to fall short most often?
Most often it's form and manner material on their logs or on their pre-trip inspection report. Schedule 1s are, we're seeing a lot of outdated Schedule 1s. So the Schedule 1 list of minor and major defects was updated in 2015, and a lot of companies are still surrendering outdated versions of that schedule. And without Schedule 1, your pre-trip inspection report form is invalid. So that's the number one thing we're seeing.
And when you're talking about form and manner violations, that's again just having the right information in the right areas on the report. So fleets could probably help out a lot, but just ensuring that drivers are trained to know how to fill out the documentation that's there.
That's right. If you get most of your daily logs, you can buy them in the logbook, and most of the spaces that are on here are required to be filled out. They're required by legislation. So for example, date, time, location. This is the pre-trip inspection report down here, which we're going to be focusing on. So the company name, the vehicle plate numbers, not unit numbers. A lot of drivers mistakenly write the unit numbers down. That's great additional information, but the Ontario license plate or other jurisdictional license plates are required. The odometer reading, like that's so important. We need to know when, at what mile did you do your pre-trip inspection, and then also where you did it, and a declaration that you're doing it in accordance with the legislation, so with Schedule 1 or whatever the case.
How are you dealing with the electronic versions now that those are coming
out? There are a lot of electronic versions out there, and as long as it satisfies the scope of the legislation, so it has all of the information that's required by law, then the app is accepted, or the e-log version is accepted, of course.
It's all about what is collected more than anything else.
That's right.
Okay. Well, let's start taking a look at some equipment then. Now, JG Drapeau has loaned us the truck for this sample inspection we're going through, so we don't really have any cargo today. But what are the first steps that will be followed when a truck first comes in for an inspection?
When a truck comes in for an inspection, the first thing we do is get it to park into a nice, safe location. And then we talk to the driver to find out certain things about his trip, where he's going, what he's carrying, where he's coming from. We make sure we record vehicle information, so plate markers, unit numbers, and as well as the vehicle's mileage. And then we begin our inspection.
Okay. Well, how about you prepare our driver, Brad, here, and we'll get things started.
Sure. Hi, Brad.
Hi, how are you?
So I'm going to be doing a full level 1 inspection today.
All right.
So I'm just going to put my wheel chocks in place, and when I do, I'll get you to release your parking brakes for me, okay?
That's
Tractor
fine.
and trailer.
No problem.
Okay, go ahead and release your brakes. And can you just tell me what your air pressure is reading?
90 pounds.
90 pounds? Okay, perfect. So we're going to be starting the inspection now.
All right.
So we're going to begin the actual inspection of the equipment now, and it starts at the front of the truck. So we're going to be looking at things like, well, everything, windshield lights. What are you actually covering here?
So at the front of the vehicle, we cover bumper lights, reflectors, marker lights, windshield wipers, and mirrors.
Okay. What's the most common defect that you tend to run into at this point in the inspection?
A lot of lighting defects, so headlights out, turn signals out, marker lights are very commonly burnt out, and believe it or not, sometimes windshield wipers fail to operate.
Okay, so from between the major and the minor defect side of things, these would all tend to fall in the minor category when you're looking at marker lights, but headlights would be, walk me through that.
Yes, most of the lighting at the front of the vehicle will be minor in nature. When you run into major defects at the front is if it's nighttime and you've got no headlights, so left or right fail to work. Or if it's raining, for example, and your windshield wipers aren't doing their job.
So it depends on the condition then, and so what it might be considered a minor defect daytime, major defect at nighttime if it's both headlights out.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well let me get out of the way and let you do that first step of the inspection.
Okay, perfect. Okay, driver, turn on your key and all your lights. Perfect. High beam, low, left, right. Good. Four ways, off, windshield wipers, and your horn.
Now, at the time that we're filming this particular piece, Ontario has zero tolerance for any wheel-related defects, and this is one of the first stops in the pre-trip inspection as well, or the CVSA inspection. So walk me through what you're looking for on the individual components.
Sure. So we get to the first axle wheel, we're checking the tire condition for one, so we want to make sure the rubber is good, both the tread and the sidewall. And then we get to the meat and potato operation of the truck itself, which is the wheels. So we're checking the rims, we're checking the fasteners. So every single fastener should be touched during your inspection, your pre-trip inspection. Loose wheel fasteners become sheared off, you have wheel offs occurring. We're also checking the hub assembly, so the bearing cover here, and we want to check for oil fluid levels. Running out of hub oil, wheel bearing failure, right? So this is why we have a zero tolerance for any wheel related defects in Ontario. We're checking for cracks, elongated stud holes, and that's basically it.
So other signs of trouble could be rust weeping from the bolt holes, even though everything looks in place. Now the one thing with all the fasteners, once they're properly torqued in place, is the hand enough really to really tell if there's going to be enough clamping force for the wheel?
The hand pressure is what we use during our CVSA inspection, but there can be other indicators telling you that perhaps there might be some looseness there. Gaps between the washer and the disc wheel itself, or spoke wheel, if that's what we're looking at, a spoke wheel. But we, for our standards, go by hand tight fasteners, and yes, we look for any rust perhaps is an indicator, or a new tire. Like if you can see a nice shiny fastener, thread is nice and shiny, it's indicating that perhaps the wheel has been taken off recently. You might want to ask the driver, has this wheel been taken off? Has it been retorqued?
Okay, and when you're looking at the tire, obviously you're looking for just the tread depth in general, some unusual signs of wear, exposed parts of the tire from on the casing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we look at the tread depth for sure. The standards are pretty low for the tread depth in Ontario, so below the wear indicator in the legislation is usually 230 seconds. We're looking for cord exposed, any cord exposed in the tread or sidewall areas, any bulging, so indicating perhaps tread sidewall separation is going to occur. So we're just looking at the general wear and tear of those tires.
So give me a bit of an idea of some of the major and minor defects that we're going to find on a wheel end.
Sure, absolutely. Some of the major defects that we're going to see are flat tires, leaking tires that you can see or feel or hear the air leak, low tread wear. Oh, and not for highway use. So, I mean, sometimes you'll see not for highway use on a tractor trailer that's heading down the highway. So we want to make sure that they're meant for highway use. And minor defects would be something like tread damage. So if you have a recap and part of the recap is starting to peel off, or if you've got a good gouge in the tread that's not quite through to the cord, because as we know, exposed cord as well in the side and tread area are major defects.
So now that we're moving into the tank area where we have the diesel exhaust fluid and obviously the diesel, walk through what you're looking at in terms of the tank itself.
Sure. So when it comes to the tank, we're first and foremost looking for the components are secure to the vehicle. So the steps are nice and secure. The straps are secured to the tank. There's no leaking fuel coming from the tank. The cap is secure and not loose or missing. While we're here, we absolutely check the air lines between the tractor and the trailer. And we're checking for any chafing, any cut or bruised, any bulging air lines, any exposed braids, or even disconnected or improperly connected glad hands.
What about the condition of the glide hands as well? So in terms of how well the rubber seals are in place, that sort of thing, is that something that you're paying much attention to? Or?
Yep, for sure, because if we have an air leak, then we've got a defect. So if the coupling is so bad in there that it's causing air to leak, then we've got a minor defect under Schedule 1. And same as if you've got an airline that's been cut and damaged to an extent that the air is leaking out, we would have a defect under Schedule 1.
So we've already talked about the steer axle and the wheel and the components looking at there, but what are you looking at when we get back to the duals?
Sure, well when we get back to the duals, the most common difference is going to be that you've got a dual set of tires. So we need to look in between the set of tires, make sure there's no objects lodged in there, rocks, whatever the case may be. We can inspect the rims as well from inside, and also making sure our tires aren't inflated or deflated to a point where they're actually making contact with each other.
What's the most common related issue that you're going to find back here that would be unique to a dual set?
A lot of flat tires, believe it or not.
On the inside because they're not getting checked, or?
That could be the case. When you have one tire and it's flat, you know it, right? When you've got a dual, you've got one to carry the extra weight of the other one. So if you've got one flat, it's not going to be that predominantly noticeable to you. So.
Okay. Well, let's move up to the suspension then. That we're back here. What are you looking for at the suspension?
Sure. So when we get to the suspension, we're looking if it's air suspension. We're looking for any damage to the airbag itself, deflation. We want to make sure that they're inflated, they're up, if they're in use. We check our spring hangers as well. We check our bolts for the mounting to the frame. The bolts down at the lower section of the hanger as well. And looking for any cracks, any movement, any missing or loose fasteners, braided, patched bags as well.
What would be the difference between major and minor defects when you're looking at the suspension?
The difference depends on the type of suspension system. So whether it's a airbag or if it's a leaf spring suspension. With leaf springs, broken leaf would be a minor defect. If you got more than one, or if you've got a main leaf broken, you've got a major defect. Missing fasteners would be major defects as well. Or anything that's going to cause that suspension component to shift and contact another part of the vehicle.
And then let's talk about where the tractor meets trailer on the coupling side of things. What are you looking for around the fifth wheel?
Yeah, the fifth wheel is a really important part of the truck. If your fifth wheel fails, there's going to be big problems on the highways. So we want to check all of our mounting bolts, making sure that they're secure and they're in place. We check our fore and our aft stops. So those are really important for the sliding fifth wheels. They're not required for fixed fifth wheels for obvious reasons. We're also checking our upper and lower couplers. So the upper plate, the entire upper plate is load bearing. So we want to make sure there's no cracks, no rusty holes or deterioration, making sure that it's attached to the trailer itself. And then we check our fifth wheel plate. We check our kingpin a little bit later on in the inspection for proper engagement, making sure our release handle is locked in the locked position. And we're checking the pivot pin and pivot bracket and the sliding locks as well, making sure that the kingpin is locked in place.
Now that we're moving down the side of the trailer, what are some of the things that you're looking for?
Well, when we're finished up with the axles here, we're going to check our mud flaps to make sure that they're there and that they're securely fastened to the vehicle. We're going to check landing gear again, making sure our vehicle components are there and they're secure. They're not going to come detached and bounce down the highway and perhaps through a windshield. And then we move along down the side of the van trailer. We're checking the lower rail and the upper rail. This is a really integral part of the semi-trailer. So this is commonly referred to as the bay area, and failure in this area can be very catastrophic. So I don't know if you've seen some images perhaps of the sagging van trailers where they just break down the middle. So we want to make sure that our lower rail isn't cracked.
And that would be any cracks in the lower rail would be considered major defect?
Yep. Any cracks in the lower rail, any sagging, dipping frames. We also want to check the rivets and our side panels, making sure they're secure. Upper rail has the same integral part of the vehicle as well.
Now, if we're looking at dangerous goods, there's also going to be the placarding that you want to look at there, Eric.
Yeah, you want to be aware if the vehicle you're inspecting has placards, you want to know what those placards are for. So you're definitely going to want to get into the trailer and inspect the cargo as well. But placards have to be displayed when they're required. They have to be on point, so as such, and clearly displayed on the sides and front and rear of the vehicles.
And we have marker lights as well. These would largely be minor defects if they're not working?
Yes, they would be minor defects, reflectors, and this is a really important part of our inspection as well as conspicuity marking. So more than 51% of the length of the semi-trailers are required to be covered in this nice reflective conspicuity.
So now we're back at the bogie. What are you looking for in terms of the assembly here?
Sure, when we come to this, the bogies, this vehicle components, we're looking at the air lines leading from the tractor to the trailer bogies. So they run along the trailer length and they come back to these brakes. So we're checking to make sure that there's no damage or deterioration there. And then we're checking the frame. So the cross members of the trailer and where they attach to the sliding bogie, we want to make sure that all of our attachment points are intact. So there's no lifting or separation there. Then we're going to check the slider guides, making sure that the slides are within the guides and that the guides aren't cracked or broken. We're also checking our pins, making sure that they're engaged and that they're not worn to the extent that they're not going to do their job. Get a nice visual of the frame, and then from the frame to the suspension, and from the suspension to where the rubber meets the road. We're going to check all the tires again. Tires, rims, hubs, fasteners.
And of course here we have a nice clear hub where we can look in and see what the fluid levels are like, so we know that the bearing's well protected on that side.
That's right.
You mentioned on the airlines as well that you're checking them. You're looking for, I assume, rubbing, chafing, that sort of thing. Is that major or minor if you see examples of that?
It depends on the severity. So if you've got air leak, that would be a minor defect. But if you've got air leaking to an extent that the cords are exposed or through the cords, then you would be out of service, and that could possibly be a major defect.
So we've already checked the lights and markings at the back of the tractor. Now we've come right to the rear of the vehicle, to the back of the trailer. What are you looking for back here?
Back here we're looking for lights and reflectors, making sure that they're functioning as intended. We're also going to make sure that the doors are closed, locked. We're looking at conspicuity markings again. So we want that reflective tape at the back of the trailer as well. And license plates are affixed.
Now, when we're looking at the underride guard, what kind of damage is going to be acceptable? Because some of them still get a little battered, a little bent. What's actually considered a major defect if you get there?
Well, you don't typically get to major defect when it comes to the bumper unless it's going to fall off the vehicle. But there are specifications to the dimensions of that bumper in order to be a 53-foot semi-trailer. So that's where that would come into play.
Now, when we look at the lighting packages at the rear of the vehicle, there's a lot of confusion about what's major and what's minor. That can be dictated by the time of day, I guess.
Yep, for sure. Tail lights, for example, are required all the time, but at night is when they're required the most. So if your taillights aren't functioning at night, then you've got a major defect. Turn signals, they need to function all the time. So whether it's a right or left one out, that's a major defect. And then again, your brake lights, you need to have at least one brake light functioning at the back of the truck. If you've got no brake lights, you've got a major defect.
Okay, well, I'll leave you to do the inspection for this part of the vehicle.
Okay, great. Okay, lights on. Good, left, right, off, 4 ways, off, and brake. Good.
So now we've made our way around the tractor trailer, and we're back to the right side saddle tank and by the exhaust. What are you looking for here?
Yep, when we're inspecting an exhaust system, we just want to check for leaks. So an easy way to do that would be, an indicator would be that black soot that comes out, usually around the coupling, elbows or other couplers on the exhaust pipe. Some exhaust pipes just get rusty and corroded to a point where there is just holes in it. So we're checking for any leaks in the exhaust system, and the difference between major and minor would be whether or not the leak is located under the cab and whether or not that exhaust could actually get up and into the cab of the vehicle.
Okay, so at that point it's considered a major defect, but in terms of the vertical component of the stack, what about though if I'm near the upper window in the case of this day cab, so the upper part of the stack, is that considered major or would that be minor?
That would still be considered minor.
Now during a pre-trip inspection, we're going to be taking a look at things like belts and fluid levels, but those aren't included in a CVSA inspection. You're not looking at that.
No, we're not.
Okay, so what are you focused on when you come in at scale?
Well, we focus on the steering components at this stage of the inspection. So your steering shaft, your steering box, your pitman arm and drag links, any of the linkage, making sure our bolts are nice and tight. We also get an excellent view of the suspension from this front, the leaves, the U-bolts, and we can get a good view of our brake chamber and push rod from here.
Okay, and so all of these would be considered major defects if you found them. They would ground the vehicle.
Absolutely, because if we have a steering defect, that's going to cause, in effect, the safe operation of the vehicle itself.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I'll leave you to the marking and measuring now.
All right, great. And then I would have the driver rock his steering wheel. So I would just have you rock your wheel back and forth nice and hard. And you just get a good view of the different linkages. Okay, good.
So now when we're inspecting brake components in particular, I understand that you have a bit of a pet peeve when it comes to the understanding of the systems. What is that?
My pet peeve when it comes to brakes is when I'm interviewing a driver that has recently gone through an inspection and I question him or her as to what size and type of brake chamber they have. And a lot of drivers don't know how to properly identify their brake chamber. And if you can't identify your brake chamber, then you really don't know what is the maximum allowable push rod travel for that chamber itself.
So there's no way to know whether it's in adjustment or out.
That's right.
Okay. So how do they tell the difference?
Well, most of the chambers do have a marking on them and it'll tell you what type of chamber or what size. So common chambers for the front are either clamp type 20 or clamp type 24, and common chambers for the rest of the tractor trailer or configuration are type 30, whether that be long or regular stroke. So when we're inspecting brake components, we want to make sure that we can identify the brake chamber. So this one is a type 24 clamp, and it's got the trapezoidal tag here, which is indicating that it's a long stroke chamber. We want to check the slack adjuster, making sure that it's securely mounted. The cotter pin and clevis pins are connecting the push rod to the slack adjuster. We want to make sure that the chamber is securely mounted and there's no corrosion, holes in the chamber itself. And then, of course, our air lines, which send the air into the chamber, making sure that the air lines aren't damaged.
And of course, all of these fall into the major defect category that we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'll leave you to further your inspection here.
Great. Okay, so we're gonna go underneath the truck. When we're under here, we're gonna be checking the steering. So I'm gonna get the driver to rock his wheel. Can you rock your wheel? And we're checking our drag link, checking the tie rod ends on both the left and the right side, looking for excessive wear. Okay, that's good. Checking our U-bolts, our suspension, our axle, the axle itself, looking for any cracks. And then we get a really good visual of the internal components of the brake. So we get a look at the brake shoes, the drum, looking at the linings, making sure there's no cracks, looking at the return springs and the S-cam. Both sides, you're looking at the same thing. Spring hangers, spring packs, again, making sure our U-bolts are tight. Checking the frame, looking for any sags or cracks in the frame itself. Checking our air tanks to make sure that they're securely attached to the vehicle. Any air lines that you can observe from down here, you're going to check. You also get a good look at your fuel tanks from under here. So if you suspect a leak, this is a good spot to look for dripping fuel. And then we check our drive line now. So we want to check the U-joint, checking all the fasteners, making sure that they're not backed off or loose, the bearing cap, looking for any cracks in the drive line itself. Checking the straps from the saddle tank from underneath. Looking for any excessive play in the drive line at the U-joint. Suspension for the tandem axle or the axle on the tractor. Check the suspension. We want to identify our brake chambers, just like we did on the front. These ones are 30 long and they're long stroke, so they're going to get a little bit more push rod travel. So these have square ports where the air inlets are, which is an indicator that they're long stroke. So again, you want to check your chambers, make sure they're securely fastened. You want to check the air lines leading to the chambers to make sure that there's no crimping, no damage, no bulge. We mark our push rods at the face of the chamber. Again, we're checking our slack adjusters. We're checking our push rod themselves, the cotter pin and the clevis pins. Back to the suspension and the axle. We're checking the U-joints, U-bolts, making sure they're tight. There's no cracks in the suspension system, no leaks, no audible air leaks. We get a good view, again, of our internal braking components. So we're checking the brake shoes, the spider casting, return springs, the S-cam, the camshaft, the drum. When we're under here, we also get a good view of the inside sidewall of our tires. So we're making sure we're checking those as well. Checking the drive line between the differentials. So again, checking for any excessive play at the U-joint. Checking our bearing cap retainer bolts are there, our end cap fasteners. Checking to make sure that our suspension is securely fastened so there's no loose airbags. Continuing along the drive line. Again, we're back to the other set of brake chambers, so we're going to identify them. These are, again, 30 type clamp, and they've got the square air inlets, which are indicating long stroke. Marking our push rods at the face of the chamber. Checking our air lines. Again, making sure there's no crimps, no cut, damage, chafing. There's no audible air leaks. Checking our slack adjusters again, our clevis pin, cotter pins. Checking to make sure our air chambers are securely fastened. And again, examining the internal braking components, making sure there's no cracked linings, no loose lining segments. The drum is intact. And the airbags are securely fastened. There's no cuts, braided damage, no patch, and no air leak in the suspension system. Rear of the differential, we just have a seat up and we take a look at the kingpin just to make sure that it's properly locked and engaged. We continue along the van trailer, checking cross members to make sure there's no sagging cross members. Make sure there's no cargo that's protruding through the floor. Any airlines that you can get a visual on, you want to make sure that they're not damaged. We're also checking the security of other vehicle components. So we want to make sure our spare tire, if there is one, is secured. So it's not just sitting in the cradle, it's also got a chain that's going to prevent it from perhaps coming loose. Airlines. So checking, make sure there's no corrosion, no bulges, no improper splicing of the airlines. And air tanks, we want to make sure they're secure. The axle, no cracks in the axle, no looseness. Airbags are inflated. A good visual here of the internal components. So our brake linings, there's no cracks, there's no loose lining segments. Camshaft is secure. Push rod and slack adjuster chambers are securely mounted. Air lines, again, leading to the chambers. Shock absorbers are secure. These are type 30 regular stroke chambers. So they've got the round inlets and there's no other long stroke indicators. Marking our push rods again. Air tanks are secure. Shock absorbers are secure. Chambers, airlines, all of the same components throughout the vehicle. We're just checking, marking our push rods, checking our cross members all the way through, mud flaps, tires, and frame. Anything that we can see from a different vantage point. And then we come out.
Obviously, one of the most common defects that still comes up in any blitz is always brake adjustment. We see it this time and again, and it's probably still good to have a reminder for it because it's still a major defect that you're looking at as well. So can you walk us through the measurement of brake adjustment?
Yep, so the first step to your brake adjustment is, like I spoke of earlier, is making sure you have an identity of your brake chamber. So you know what type it is and what size it is so that you know what the maximum push rod travel can be. These are 24 longs, and the maximum travel is 2 inches. So what we do is we have we mark our push rod, we have the driver apply his brake all the way, and we can get a measurement from the face of the chamber to our chalk mark, so 1.5 inches, and off. So that is within the adjustment limit.
So now one of the stops during the inspection is the tractor protection valve. Let's talk a little bit about how that system works and what you're looking for here.
Sure, the tractor protection valve is designed to protect the tractor and the trailer should the coupling system fail on the combination. So should something go catastrophically wrong at this part of the vehicle and the trailer comes detached, these lines sever and it's going to spike the trailer brakes so that the trailer can come to a stop, and then the tractor protection valve is meant to close in order to keep enough air in the tractor so that the tractor can come to a safe stop as well.
Sure. And now this is one of the points during the inspection where you're going to have the driver coming out and unhooking the glad hand so we can do that test.
That's right.
Okay, well, let's get to that.
Okay, perfect. Just push your hand on the brake pedal. So, yeah. So I'm just checking to make sure that there's no air escaping from the service line, which ensures that the tractor protection valve did indeed close. Okay, that's good.
So now we're going to the in-cab portion of your inspection. What are you going to be looking for there once you hop up with the driver?
What we check for in here is gauges, making sure the gauges are operating, the warning lights are functioning, the steering wheel free play is within the limits, the seat and the seat belt are functioning as intended, and of course the windshield isn't cracked or the defrost is unable to create a clear view of the windshield.
What are we looking at in terms of major or minor defects in there?
A minor defect would be a little bit of steering wheel free play. Major would be well outside of the allowable limit. Insecure seat or seat belt would be major. Telescopic steering doesn't lock would be a major. And no low air warning device is a major defect.
There you go. Well, I'll leave you to it.
Thanks. All right then, so go ahead and turn your key on. And just pump your brake down so that, there we go. So your low air warning indicators are lit and sounding. Good, and you can start the truck. And I'll just check steering wheel free play. Good. Seats secure. I'll just get you to put your seatbelt on. Excellent. You can shut the truck off.
So we're almost done the entire inspection here. What is the final step that we're looking at now that you're back at the fifth wheel?
We check the fifth wheel for excessive play. So it's a simple procedure. We have the trailer brakes engaged, the tractor brakes are released so that they can get a nice, it's often referred to as the tug test. So you're just stretching out, making sure there's not too much play between the upper and lower couplers.
Okay, well, I'll leave you to do that then.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so your trailer brakes are on, tractor brakes are off. All right, so I'm gonna get you to start the engine and then just keep your eye on me. We're gonna start in the reverse and just a little bit come back, and then we're gonna go ahead, and then this is it, okay?
All right.
Perfect. Okay. Good, forward. Good. That's it. Yep, here Brad, this is your clean bill of health. So this is your commercial vehicle inspection report from us saying that you had a level 1 inspection today and that no defects were found. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna just put these beautiful decals on the truck and trailer and you're on your way.